afternoon, Your Excellencies, learned ladies and gentlemen. I've been set the tasks of trying to frame our afternoon discussions. So my talk is about climate change in IDB member countries, challenges and opportunities. And given the many different environments in different countries that we cover, this is obviously quite a large scope, and in 7 minutes it's going to be a very superficial run-through, I'm afraid. If we look at the challenges, if we look here in Africa, for example, IPCC report, which is the main report we go to look at what is the latest knowledge in climate change. We can begin to look at the changes in temperature. One of our challenges here in Africa, the map on the left-hand side highlights the climate change between 1901 and 2012. And then when we look on the right-hand side, we can begin to see temperature changes predicted at annual temperature changes, so we're not even dealing with the high events, are likely to change between the mid and the late 21st century 3 or 4 or 5 degrees. This is going to impact many parts of the economy, of health and society. Think about how those changes will affect the crops we can grow, the roads that we can build, and many other aspects. If we look at the challenge of precipitation, it's much more complex. Some areas are going to get wetter, some areas are likely to be drier, and this brings with us a whole new set of ideas. Where do we build that dam? Where can we put that road system through? Because we can see these changes, not only is it in the annual amount, but it's going to be in the nature of those precipitation events. So I was talking to people in Cape Town at the weekend, and they were talking about the major storms they've had. So although the average conditions are different, it's the big events coming through. There are many other climate variables. At ICBA, we focus on drylands, the marginal areas, and some of the work we have been doing ourselves has been focusing on the Middle East, North Africa. If you see the IPCC report, it's a great big hole where we are. There's little research. So one of the things we've been doing under a USAID-funded project is downscaling the climate models that best suit the MENA region. We find it is actually the Japanese model. So we've been looking at what have been the changes that are likely. And of course, given that we are an arid environment, it's the increasing drying conditions. This is going to challenge both our water and food security. So we can see across there, we're seeing major changes, up to 40% increase in consecutive dry days. These are when you have a number of days in a row without any rainfall. So this means we're going to have to think about, are rain-fed agriculture systems still viable? Are we going to have to move over to irrigation? And what types of irrigation to keep crops growing during those dry days? And it's not just about the climate data, we need to think about what are the impacts. We have to go from those raw data on climate data, and this again is from the IPCC. This is highlighting, the tractor is obviously highlighting agriculture, the blue for water, and we can see the different biosystems as well. If you look across the IDB countries, one of the major things that affect it is water. Those blue dots are across all our IDB countries, so we know that water security is going to be an increasing challenge. This is obviously a highly complex diagram, which we don't have time in these 7 minutes to go through. So we can see the impacts, where they're going to be, and what we need to start to think about if we're going to address that. But some of the challenges are not about the impacts on the ground. It's convincing people that adaptation strategies are important, that climate change is happening now. So if you look at the IDB countries, how many of those countries have well-developed adaptation strategies and implement it? The Minister for Land, Environment and Rural Development highlighted in her talk what they're doing here in Mozambique, but not all countries are that developed. And why is that? Well, one of it is the IPCC report, and all the major reports come out about what's happening in 2035, in 2050, in 2100. Well, many of us won't be here. And more importantly, many of the decision makers and the politicians, they work on much shorter time spans to do that. So those futures are quite remote. There's also the fact that many of the areas that we're looking at, we're always hearing about the polar bears in the Arctic. Well, they're actually quite remote from IDB countries as well, so there is this whole notion that climate change is sort of happening, but it's not going to happen for a while, and it's not really going to happen here in my IDB country. Well, I'm sorry that isn't, of course, true, as we know here from Mozambique, some of the things you were mentioning, but also some of the work we've recently done in ICBA. So we've been working with Oxford University, looking at a drought event. It's one of the most severe droughts for records in Jordan, Palestine and Lebanon in January, February, March 2014. And we did various modelling. We used massive modelling capabilities at Oxford to look at how much of this drought, which we know is a naturally occurring condition in this region, is to do with natural climate change, natural variability, or how much of it is to do with anthropic, with human climate change. And we found that 60% of this drought we could attribute to this using very scientific methods. So we now know that climate change is affecting us now. And things like drought in Jordan is very important. It had huge implications. The rivers didn't flow during the summer, groundwater was taken out, and there was a big crop failure. But of course it's not all doom and gloom, because we now have the chance to mobilise technology, mobilise finance, to begin to look at some of those opportunities that this climate change is offering. We can think about more water efficient methods. One of the areas that, and ICBA has running through most of its programs, this climate change element. Because ICBA works in marginal environments, whether it's saline or dry environments, we know many more parts of the world are going to be affected by this. So we can bring our science and our innovation to those areas. One of those areas is the Mawrid project, which, as you know in Arabic, means the source. One of the problems is those decision makers in many of the countries, they can't, the IPCC is just too broad. We need local data. So we have been, through USAID funding, working with NASA, we have not only been doing climate change downscaling for our region, MENA, we've also been doing water and crop modelling, because we really want to know how do the specific species in the MENA region, it's the type of wheat and the type of pearl millet and sorghum, how are they going to be affected? Because many of these are naturally adapted. And from that, we are producing a knowledge hub of changes in water resources, changes in crop production systems, and the important elements within that. Within the MENA region, soil moisture and evapotranspiration are critical. It's not necessarily the amount of precipitation, because we use irrigation so much. And of course, all of this allows us to do risk analysis. Where are the most vulnerable people? What is the social and economic conditions of those people environment? What are the environments like there? In these areas that we are able to see are at risk, because we need to focus our investment, we need to focus our areas. And how can this data then be used to support adaptation strategies? And this data will be made available to anybody, whether you're a researcher or a business or the minister responsible for climate change, through our knowledge hub. Another area that we work on all the time is enhancing crop production in these increasingly marginal areas. So how can we improve irrigation? What's the role of saline water in irrigation? What's the role of treated wastewater? If we know that we're going to be more water stressed, can we look at these alternative measures to support that? And we have a lot of insight and research on how to use that water and what crops we can grow. We can look at particular species. For example, we're finding that quinoa is very tolerant to salt and dry conditions. This is a crop that has great food, nutritional value, and we can bring that into different areas. And there's a lot of research being done there about. We also need to look at food chain networks. How much of that food production is being lost on its way to the market? If we're going to be having increasing temperatures, is this going to affect the road system? Are we going to need more refrigeration? And this is areas that need additional investment if we want to maximise the food that we are growing with the water. And of course, all of this, we want to link this back to the Sustainable Development Goals and linking this to rural livelihoods. So what role do international organisations have, whether it's ICBA, IDB, UNEP, or any of those present here? We know that there's a lot of experience out there, and we need to bring that from the international people through to regional to local experience sharing. We're all in this, doing this together for the first time, but are we? Where can we draw on that? We know that technology and engineering has huge potential to ease the impacts of climate change, whether it's adaptation or in mitigation. Solar panels, wind farms, biogas movement. But we also know that economics and policy to be able to motivate people to adapt, we need, whether it's subsidies or investment strategies or safety nets, we have to think about what is needed at our national government level and our local government level to encourage this adaptation. And then, of course, the important role of the IDB and other funding organisations in mobilising finance to be able to support these infrastructures. So the challenges bring opportunities. We have a real chance to bring more water efficient agriculture, more efficient transport systems through that, and by leveraging the climate change funds that are available, we can bring that through to the IDB countries. I hope this has given you some insight to the work, not only of the ideas that we would perhaps discuss this afternoon, but also on the work at ICBA. Thank you very much for your attention.